Today you're going to get a base provided for you. That should always be sitting on your little clay mat. That way things don't get stuck to your table. You'll also have your name tag. That will get turned in with your clay pot at the end of class, so you get yours back next week. And you'll also have some clay provided for you at your table. Please don't take out a bunch and try to hoard it all for yourself, because if it's just sitting on the table, it's going to start to dry out. You want to leave it kind of covered and wrapped in plastic until you need it. That way it stays nice and fresh. We are going to begin today with coils. Remember, our goal is they need to be thick enough. So look at your thumb. If your coils start getting thinner or skinnier than your thumb, they're too thin. Thicker is better. It'll make a much more sturdy pot. They should be even. You shouldn't have really skinny parts or really thick parts. It should be about the same thickness all the way through. And of course, it has to be long enough to pretty much wrap around this base. So you want to make sure that when you are tearing off pieces of clay to begin with, you don't want to rip off the world's tiniest piece of clay. That's not going to be enough to make a coil. I usually say work in like fourths. So take your fingers and kind of pinch and twist and divide like one piece in half, and maybe divide it into like 4 smaller pieces. And you'll kind of gauge as you're working if that's enough. Before you start rolling your clay on the table, take it and squeeze it in your hand a few times to make it into kind of a sausage or pickle shape, and then you can use the table to help roll them smaller and also a little bit more smooth. You want to make sure that you are using a slow motion. It shouldn't be super quick, and use your entire hand. Roll from the bottom of your palm all the way up to the tips of your fingers. Sometimes it's helpful to make a bunch of coils at once. That way you don't have to make one and stop and attach it. If you have a little stockpile of coils, then you can work on attaching them and building your pot up well. Once you have a few coils, it's time to attach them to your base. You want to try to stack this first coil kind of right on the edge of the base. That way your pot has a nice, sturdy, wider base. If you just stick them on today, they'll stick, but we do want to make sure that we are scoring and slipping. Or kind of scratching and attaching, and you're going to use that toothbrush. Put your pointer finger on the heart, and you're going to drag that toothbrush around the outside edge. You should be getting some of that slip or kind of watered down clay on the edge, but you should also see some scratch marks. That's going to really make sure that your coils adhere well. You want to scratch where your coil is going, but you're also going to scratch the bottom side of your coil. And then when you attach things, you put scratches to scratches. That slip will act as kind of like clay glue to hold your pieces together. Again, you want to make sure it's kind of right on the edge of that circular base, and hopefully your coil is long enough that it should overlap a little bit. You want to use your popsicle stick, or you can just tear it to be able to kind of get a perfect little ring or circle of a coil, and then you can smudge the edges together. You want to make sure that when you're doing this, you're not squeezing or flattening your coils down. You want to leave your coils very thick. Don't do any squeezing or smushing of your coils until next week when it comes time to smooth the pot out. If you smush them too soon, your pot will get very weak as you add things on top. You're going to keep attaching coils in this way, making sure you scratch and attach in between each layer of coils. I would say for your first 3, 4, maybe even 5 coils, I would try to stack your coils directly on top of each other to get a nice base started before you start working on changing the shape. If you end up needing more clay, just grab some new clay from the box. Any old clay you have, just join them together, squish them up pretty well, and you can just roll in more coils. When there's about 5 minutes left of class today, you want to make sure that any coils you've rolled out, you have attached. And keep in mind that we will be adding more next week, so please make sure we're getting cleaned up on time today. Once you're done, any unused clay will just go back into the extra clay bag for next time, and all of the pots are going to be turned in to a couple of trays at the front. Make sure you bring your name tag with your pot. That way you can just set it down inside, and I can quickly pass them out next week. Make sure you guys put them close together so that we can fit a bunch onto one tray, but please don't touch someone else's pot as you're putting yours on.